President Biden is in New York City tonight, where he'll address the United Nations General Assembly for the first time since taking office. Tuesday's speech is an opportunity for the White House to reaffirm its commitments to U.S. allies. Major NATO members like Germany, France, and Britain were critical of the abrupt U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. It's also a chance to repair relations with France. Australia broke off a deal with the French to purchase nuclear-powered submarines from the U.S. instead. France recalled their ambassadors from Washington and Sydney in anger over the deal. But the White House said today there are no plans to change the agreement. This afternoon, Press Secretary Jen Psaki dismissed the notion that the U.S. and China are headed for a new Cold War. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called on the nations to repair their, quote, dysfunctional relationship before he meets with President Biden tonight.
Our relationship with China is one not of conflict, but of competition. And so we wouldn't agree with the characterization of the relationship. As I would note in the readout of the president's call with President Xi just last week, a 90-minute call that covered an extensive list of topics. It was a conversation that was candid, but it was certainly not elevated. Tomorrow, the president will deliver a speech, as you all know, at the UN General Assembly, and he will make absolutely clear that he is not looking to pursue a new Cold War with any country in the world.
The House and Senate are back in session for the first time since July. Lawmakers are gearing up for a busy fall schedule, with multiple deadlines looming at the end of the month. Democrats are planning to unveil a short-term spending bill sometime this week to avoid a government shutdown. Republican leaders insist they won't vote to raise the debt ceiling, despite doing so several times during the Trump administration. Treasury officials warn the government could run out of funds in October if Congress fails to compromise on how much money it can spend and borrow. For more, let's bring in Ed O'Keefe, Natasha Korecki, and Oma Seddiq. Ed is CBS News senior White House and political correspondent. Natasha is a White House correspondent for Politico. And Oma is a politics reporter at Insider. Hello, happy Monday to you all. Ed, let me start with you. How is President Biden planning to reassure the global community the U.S. is quote-unquote back, in spite of recent setbacks like the Afghanistan withdrawal?
Well, good to see you, Elaine, at the beginning of what is arguably the highest stakes week yet for the president, both on the domestic and international front. And it's going to be a real test of his diplomatic skills, I think, arguably with members of his own party and then with some of our closest allies. Look, in that speech tomorrow, the White House says what he's trying to do essentially is turn the page on 20 years of conflict in Afghanistan and say that the United States is trying to recalibrate its foreign policy and its focus around the world. You heard Jen Psaki today talk about competition, not conflict with China, no desire for some kind of new Cold War between the two biggest economic powers. Expect him to make that push. And then, of course, talk about the broader global need to take on and finally defeat, or at least figure out a way to manage better, the pandemic that's ravaging around the world. So both of those twin topics expected to dominate much of the speech. They're also likely to call out the fact that the United States is in agreement with much of the developed world regarding climate change, which would be another way of sort of trying to get back in the good graces of the French, as the president faces some real challenges there with French President Macron and the possibility that they'll have a very interesting phone call at some point later this week about the differences that were sparked by that announcement on a nuclear-powered submarine last week.
Yeah, very interesting, I'm sure. Well, Natasha, the United States is extending travel restrictions at Mexican and Canadian land border crossings while planning to allow fully vaccinated visitors from abroad to enter the U.S. What is the administration's justification for that?
Well, they're saying that as long as they are fully vaccinated, they may enter the country. And this does ease a lot of tensions with Europe. It eases tensions with the travel industry that says it's lost $500 billion last year and saw a 79% decrease in spending. So, they're saying that if you are fully vaccinated, you can show this. This is the first step that they can, they're not talking about domestic travel yet, but they are talking about international travel. They also made a lot of emphasis on the fact that they are thinking about families that haven't been able to see each other in a year and a half. They haven't been able to cross the border in any way, and they haven't been able to travel internationally by air. The COVID response team, they gave a little shout out to that, to specifically to families and reuniting them, grandparents who hadn't seen grandchildren, and so forth. So this is the U.S. responding to different kinds of pressure from different industries and saying, we are going to take a step forward. And also they're outright saying, if you're unvaccinated, you're not going to get it. They're also adding, other restrictions and, qualifiers. The CDC is discussing contact tracing with airlines for international travel and the foreigners coming in. All of these things, again, go to address these different pressures that they're facing.
Meantime, Oma, the House is gearing up to vote on the bipartisan infrastructure bill next week. How are Democratic leaders trying to smooth over divisions between moderates and progressives?
That's right. Like Ed mentioned, this is going to be a busy week for Democrats. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has set this September 27th deadline, so exactly a week from today, to hold a vote on this bipartisan infrastructure package. But Democrats want to see this package voted on alongside a Democrats' only social policy package worth roughly $3.5 trillion at the moment. And this will be tough because progressive Democrats and moderate Democrats are divided on a lot of issues. One issue being the price tag of this bill itself. You have moderates like Senator Joe Manchin and Senator Kristen Sinema, who want to reduce this $3.5 trillion price tag, whereas on the other end, you have progressives like Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, who say that $3.5 trillion is enough to cover these major investments in areas like healthcare, education, climate change. But beyond the price tag, there are other issues that Democrats are divided on, such as how to lower the price of prescription drugs and how to raise taxes on the wealthy. So we may not see Democrats meet the September 27th deadline. Negotiations might extend beyond that. But this is really going to be a test of whether or not President Biden and Democrats can come together on this issue and fulfill these key priorities of theirs under their majority power.
Right. Yeah, because as you point out, these divisions really do run deep. Ed, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen repeated her call for Congress to increase the debt ceiling. She said in a recent Wall Street Journal op-ed, quote, "The past 17 months have tested our nation's economic strength. We are just now emerging from crisis. We must not plunge ourselves back into an entirely avoidable one." Republicans are telling Democrats to raise the debt ceiling without them via reconciliation. At the same time, they've vowed to filibuster. So how are Democrats planning to raise the debt limit if Republicans don't sign on?
Well, for now, they're planning to put it off until at least December, Elaine, announcing earlier today that they're going to try to pass a piece of legislation that will keep the lights on across the federal government through December, and in so doing, also suspend the debt limit until early December, trying to kick that argument down the road and give them a little more time to focus on reconciliation and the infrastructure bill and whatever else may come up between now and then. This is going to be a challenge for this White House. The Treasury Secretary has taken to the op-ed pages, has called around to senior Republicans saying, please help us out. But they have made very clear, we stand in opposition to doing this because it would essentially bankroll new spending. Democrats turn around and say, no, this is designed to actually pay for things that have already been approved and were approved during the Trump years. You should be on board with doing this. Here at the White House, they call it irresponsible of Republicans to try to pull this. But Mitch McConnell and Republicans in the House and Senate standing firm in opposition to it. So let's see if this continuing resolution, as it's called, or stopgap funding measure, whatever you prefer, gets passed and kicks things into December. That would only potentially raise the stakes, though, if Republicans continue to put off supporting another increase in the debt limit.
And Oma, Democrats suffered a serious setback Friday when the Senate parliamentarian said their plan to provide undocumented immigrants with 8 million green cards did not meet the requirements to be included in budget reconciliation. In a tweet, Senator Dick Durbin said, quote, "I am deeply disappointed, but the fight for immigration reform will continue." How so, Oma? How's that fight going to continue? And what does it say about Democrats' efforts at immigration reform if they have to involve the Senate parliamentarian?
Right, so Senate Democrats are signaling right now that they're not going to give up this fight to include immigration reform in this massive 3.5 trillion social package mentioned earlier. But the Senate parliamentarian did indeed gut their plans to include this pathway to citizenship for roughly 8 million undocumented immigrants in the country. The parliamentarian ruled that such a proposal goes just beyond budgetary issues. Senate Democrats, of course, disagree with that reasoning. They say that a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants is directly related to the budget. They argue that these undocumented immigrants, pay taxes, they have jobs, but they're not eligible for federal assistance. So, for example, the federal benefits that were distributed under the coronavirus relief legislation over the past year, such as the stimulus checks, even though undocumented immigrants pay taxes, they were not eligible for federal assistance in that way. So Senate Democrats say that this has a direct budgetary impact. This could raise the federal deficit. So this is a budget issue. So that's why they wanted to see it included in their budget reconciliation in this budget reconciliation process with their 3.5 trillion social policy package. So Democrats are upset with the Senate parliamentarian decision. They're pledging to propose alternative plans to her for her consideration, one being a potential shift in the year in which undocumented immigrants could be considered for legal status. But it remains to be seen what these proposals will be. They'll be unfolded in these coming days, we believe, and we'll have to see how the Senate parliamentarian eventually rules on that as well.
Let's turn to the pandemic. Natasha, vaccine sharing is a likely topic of debate at the United Nations meeting. The U.S. is reportedly committing to buy 500 million doses of Pfizer's vaccine to donate to other countries. The administration continually maintains they can vaccinate the U.S. and donate to countries in need. What do we know? Is that bearing out?
Well, so far, there was some concern about, of course, boosters. That's been the topic this week, right? And, will there be enough if we, do they earmark enough for the U.S. if they're going to make these promises? The government did say that they've asked Pfizer and some other in other countries that produce the vaccine to up their production. And as we know, well, we don't have to worry about the booster quite yet. This was supposed to be the week that Biden and the administration had said they wanted to start. It was a target date. And, as we know now, it's not happening. There was, it was an advisory decision that was not exactly what the White House wanted. It was much narrower. So what we're looking at now is, there's still a lot of confusion. There's a lot of confusion domestically over, when can we take the booster? Can you take Moderna? Can you mix and match them? So the White House has to do a lot of cleanup on its messaging right now. And they have to do it in a way that conveys confidence and credibility to the public. And so they have a lot of challenges ahead of themselves domestically, but, also internationally.
Ed, in our final minute, Justice Stephen Breyer on CNN Sunday dismissed the idea that politics drive the Supreme Court's decisions, and it follows similar comments from Justices Thomas and Coney Barrett. What do you make of 3 sitting justices publicly defending the High Court in recent weeks?
Yeah, and other justices have made similar comments before. I think Chief Justice John Roberts especially is quite concerned about maintaining public support for the High Court across the country. In this case, it's Breyer as he sells a memoir about his time on the High Court and is facing questions, of course, about whether or not he would consider retiring so that a Democratic president can appoint his successor, since he was appointed by Bill Clinton. They all see the polling that has come out in recent years that continues to show eroding support for them across the country. They used to rank as one of the highest, most trusted public institutions, and now, of course, they're not as much as they used to be. But to hear Thomas, Coney Barrett, and now Breyer all say it, it's a sign, I think, that all of them understand that the public's perception of them going into what is expected to be one of the most consequential terms. Our own Jan Crawford, who covers the court, says possibly in as many as 25 years. They know that the scrutiny will be on them, that some of these decisions will thrill certain sectors of America, but obviously infuriate others. And so I think they're preparing for what is expected to be a pretty high-stakes year with cases on abortion, other issues regarding immigration, and a host of others that are likely to come up between now and when they start on the, what is it, the first Monday of October.
I believe so, yeah. Pretty remarkable to see these kind of public comments from sitting justices, as you point out. I mean, it's very rare, but very much a sign of the political times we're living in. All right, Ed O'Keefe, Natasha Korecki, and Oma Seddiq, thank you all very much.
Yep.